She pretended not to remember at 7:14 in the morning, standing in my kitchen in borrowed socks, pouring coffee like someone who had rehearsed the particular nonchalance of it. The angle of the pour, the specific way she did not look at me, and I watched her perform the forgetting and said nothing. Because I had been awake for most of the night understanding exactly what the forgetting meant, and what it meant was that it had been real. Her name is Petra. She has been my best friend for 4 years, which is long enough to know the difference between her genuine moods and her performed ones. Long enough to read the specific frequency of her silences. Long enough to know that when she concentrates very hard on something ordinary, the coffee, the counter, the view from the window, she is usually thinking about something she has decided not to say. I watched her concentrate very hard on the coffee. I said good morning. She said good morning back. We talked about the weather with the careful civility of two people talking about the weather, and neither of us mentioned the shoulder, and that was the morning after the night she fell asleep on it. I have not stopped thinking about it since. The context requires explanation, because without it the shoulder sounds simple, and it was not simple. It was the exact opposite of simple. It was the thing that had been building for 4 years, through every ordinary exchange, that had accumulated a specific weight neither of us had ever acknowledged. We had been at my apartment, which is where we end up most Friday nights, not by explicit plan, by a kind of gravitational default that we had never discussed or decided. It simply happened consistently, the way things that are wanted tend to consistently happen. She comes over around 7 with something she picked up on the way. We watch whatever we are currently watching. We talk during the parts that don't require attention, and sometimes during the parts that do. And she usually leaves around 11 when one of us finally admits the responsible thing is to go to sleep. Last Friday, she did not leave around 11. What happened instead? The thing we were watching ended, and neither of us moved to conclude the evening, and we put on something else. Something slower, something neither of us was fully tracking, and somewhere in the geography of the couch the distance between us had changed. Not dramatically. By maybe 4 inches. But 4 inches in that specific direction has a specific meaning, and I was aware of the 4 inches the way you are aware of something that requires your attention without knowing yet what kind of attention it requires. She fell asleep at 12:40. I know because I looked at my phone approximately 2 minutes before it happened, in the displaced way of someone who needs something to do with their eyes, and then her head was on my shoulder and I became very still. I should explain what it is to be very still when Petra is asleep on your shoulder. If you have spent 4 years learning the precise vocabulary of her presence in a room. Petra awake is motion. She talks with her hands in ways that are completely unconscious. She shifts position constantly the way people do when their minds are too active to let their bodies settle. She has a habit of turning toward you mid-sentence to make sure you are following. That is one of the more specific and private things I find beautiful about her. I have never told her I find it beautiful. It felt like information she didn't need and I did not know what to do with. Petra, asleep on my shoulder, was completely still. Her breathing had the long, slow rhythm of someone genuinely under, not dozing, not half present, gone. There was a quality to it that I had never had access to before. In 4 years of having access to most things about her, the version of her that had stopped performing anything. No animation, no self-consciousness, no management of how she was coming across. Just her, as she actually was, trusting, without knowing she was trusting. People only fall asleep on you if some part of them has decided you are safe. You cannot fake that in sleep. The body does not perform safety. It finds it or it doesn't. Her body had found it. In me. On my shoulder specifically, at 12:40 a.m., without consulting her, in the way the body roots around the decisions the mind is too cautious to make. I stayed very still for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Here is what I thought about for 2 hours and 40 minutes, as precisely as I can reconstruct it. I thought about a Tuesday 3 years ago when I had a phone call that went badly. The kind of call that arrives with no warning and rearranges something structural, and I had not told her about it. And that evening she had texted me out of nowhere. "You okay? You seem far away today." We had not spoken that day. There was no data point that should have given me away. She had read the distance through silence across a phone screen and reached into it and found me. I thought about the time she was sick for a week, genuinely sick. The kind where you are too tired to perform wellness, and I had gone over every evening and done nothing useful, just sat there, in the chair near her bed, talking about inconsequential things and then less talking as the week went on, until by Thursday it was mostly quiet, and she told me later that the quiet specifically had been the thing, that she hadn't had to manage anything, that I had simply been there without requiring anything from her. And that this was, she said, the rarest quality in another person. I thought about all the small calibrations we had made over 4 years without naming them, the specific way our schedules had quietly arranged themselves around each other, the mutual encyclopedia of preferences and histories and interior fears we had assembled without deciding to. The way her absence from a room I am in produces a feeling I have no accurate word for and have stopped trying to find one. I thought, this is not friendship. Or rather, it is friendship, and friendship is the container. But what is in the container has been something else for a long time, and I have been careful not to examine it too closely, because examining it closely would require me to do something about it. And doing something about it contains the possibility of losing the thing I value most, and the calculation had always resolved in favor of silence, I thought. But her body fell asleep on my shoulder without asking me. She woke at 3:22 and became immediately alert in the way some people do. Not slowly, not through the gradual assembly of consciousness, but switched, present, sitting up and looking at the room with clear eyes that found the time on the screen and then found me. A pause, a specific pause, the kind that contains a processing that you can almost hear. She said, "I fell asleep." I said, "You did." She said, "Sorry," said it quickly, to the middle distance, already reaching for her phone with the practiced efficiency of someone managing an exit. I said, "Don't be." She looked at me once. Briefly, the look had something in it that I would spend the next several hours attempting to read, and I will describe it as accurately as I can. It was the look of someone who has registered that a line has been approached and is deciding, in real time, how to relate to the approach. Not frightened, not unwelcoming. Deciding, she found her shoes. She said she should get home. I said okay, and walked her out. And she said goodnight in the normal register of our normal goodnights. And the door closed, and I stood there for a moment in the quiet of the apartment that still had the shape of the evening in it. She pretended not to remember in the morning because she had forgotten her jacket. I want to be precise about this particular detail, because it matters. She drove back the next morning for the jacket, which she absolutely could have retrieved at any point over the following week with a simple text, and she arrived at 7:09, and I opened the door, and she was doing the thing with her eyes, focused on a point slightly to the side of my face. And she came in, and I said I'd find the jacket, and she said she'd get coffee going, and I thought, she came back. Not for the jacket. I have known Petra for 4 years. She knows where her jacket was. She came back to see what the morning looked like, to test the temperature of the ordinary, to determine whether the evening had changed the specific gravity of us, or whether we could absorb it and continue. This is how she operates, She does not address things directly when they are large. She approaches them sideways, in practical containers, with plausible explanations standing by. The jacket was a plausible explanation. I found it on the hook by the door. I brought it to the kitchen. She was concentrating very hard on the coffee. I set the jacket on the counter. I said good morning again, properly this time, and she said it back, and we talked about the weather with the careful civility of two people who were actually talking about something else entirely. I said nothing about the shoulder. Not because I had nothing to say. I had, if anything, an excess of things to say, accumulated over 2 hours and 40 minutes of careful stillness in the dark. I said nothing because I understood the geometry of the moment she was in. She needed the morning to be survivable first. She needed to confirm that the ground was still solid before she could look at what was growing in it. Naming the thing before she was ready to name it would not be courage. It would be pressure disguised as honesty. And she would retreat from pressure, because everyone does, and retreating would cost us something I was not willing to spend. So I let her have the forgetting. I poured my own coffee. I stood beside her at the counter, and we looked out the window at the same ordinary morning, and I said nothing about the shoulder. But I am telling you now what I have not yet told her. I remember the exact weight of it, the specific angle, the quality of the breathing that shifted from nearly asleep to gone. I remember the 2 hours and 40 minutes and what I thought during them. I remember the look she gave me at 3:22 that contained the processing I couldn't quite read. I remember the jacket that was never really about the jacket. I remember all of it with the particular precision of someone who understands he is in the middle of something that has been true for a long time and is finally, slowly, becoming visible. Here is where I am now. I am going to say something, not today. Today was the morning, and she needed the morning to be survivable, and I gave her that. Not in a grand declaration, not with architecture and rehearsal, because that is not the shape of what we are. In the ordinary register of a Friday evening, in the specific room where her body already made the decision her mind has not yet caught up to, I am going to say the thing I have been not saying for a long time. Something like, I remember, in case you were wondering. 4 words. Maybe 5. Enough to open the door without pushing her through it. Enough to give her somewhere to arrive when she is ready to arrive there. She is smart, and she is careful, and she is someone who approaches large things sideways in practical containers. And if I give her the door, she will find her own way through it. I believe this. I am also terrified of this, if I am being precise about the inventory. Both things are true. The terror and the belief and the shoulder and the jacket and 4 years of calibrations we made without naming them, all of it present simultaneously, the way things are when they are finally, after a long quiet accumulation, becoming real. She knows where I live. She already came back once this morning. I think she'll come back again. Have you ever been inside a moment that both of you noticed and neither of you named, where the silence after wasn't emptiness, but something the two of you were carefully holding between you, not ready yet to call it what it was? Tell me what that felt like from the inside. I'll read every one.